Following interview, I sit down with Scott Britton. I knew I wanted to interview Scott as soon as I came up with the idea for this new podcast. In my eyes, Scott is just such a fantastic example of entrepreneurs who actively listen and take action to their wake-up call. We talk about everything from him selling his company to Salesforce, how that made him feel. We go into the journey that followed after, where he went inward and focused on expanding his consciousness and awareness, how he battled through the physical changes that can come with big transformation. We kind of deconstruct this idea of the sickness. I've talked about this a lot, but this feeling, this hole that many entrepreneurs share. And then he talks through the big differences between content and context when it comes to ambition. Really enjoyed that part of the conversation. And then we get into his next chapter of building conscious talent with a bigger mission involved. But before we jump into it, I do want to thank our partners for supporting this podcast and helping me get it off the ground. I've been extremely intentional with who I partner with on this next phase of my life. And kind of the two big questions for me were, one, are they trying to make the world a better place? And two, are they genuinely good human beings? And both companies and entrepreneurs tick both those boxes in a really big way. So the first partner is optimizing.ai. I like to think of them as Whoop without the wearables. It can track stress levels and vital signs, all using AI through your webcam. So they're bringing this layer of digital emotional intelligence into digital experience. So imagine you could measure how users were actually feeling while they were using your product. Moments of stress, moments of delight. What if product teams could actually design technology and experiences that calm people, help them get into flow, rather than make them frustrated or stress them out? And now with optimizing.ai, you can. And then the next partner is Dream Fuel. So they provide mental performance coaching for leaders. As an athlete growing up, all the professional athletes I looked up to had mental performance coaches. And I always found it weird as I grew up that wasn't the norm in business for high performers. So this team, I've actually personally been coached by them. They are elite, and I can't understate the impact it had on both my emotional well-being and my business performance. Honestly, working with your team was, I guess, the main reason I didn't burn out earlier than I did. And they played a vital role in giving me the tools to hit my last big goal, which was raising $50 million. Funnily enough, I actually stopped working with them about 6 months before I hit this big wall because I said, I don't think I have the time, which looking back, I probably should have made the time. But they coach against about 52 different mental exercises. Two of my favorites being the guided breath work and the guided visualizations. These two things helped my goals no longer feel abstract. I could see and, I guess more importantly, feel them actually coming to life. And Kevin, their CEO, has become a good friend of mine, and they're actually offering some of the first listeners to the Wake Up Call a complimentary one-to-one coaching session, completely for free. So I would genuinely run, not walk, to snag one of these, since I'm not going to be able to do this forever. So you can go to dreamfuel.com to snag one, and you can find both optimizing.ai and Dream Fuel in the show notes below. So please go support them. We love them. But now to the important stuff. Here is my first interview. I really enjoyed it, and I think you will too. Scotty B, what's going on, man? Welcome.
Other Scotty B.
This is going to get confusing real quick.
It's going to two Scotty B's in one podcast. This is a recipe for greatness. Things are good, man. Things are good. I'm excited to be here. I don't know what we're going to talk about today fully, but I know some magic's going to happen. And the general theme of your show is what I'm passionate about. So excited to explore this with you.
Thanks, brother. Well, I have no idea what we're going to be talking about too. So let's get into it. I've, you know, gone down this journey of, starting this new media brand. And when I first thought about it, and it came about after, kind of announcing to the world my own experience with burnout and this incredible outpouring of people that sometimes I've known for years, shared like some really intimate, deep struggles that they were going through. And I was called to share some of those stories. And as I went along that path, you were one of the first people that I was like, oh man, I hope I can get Scotty on the podcast, because I've been following your journey for quite a while now. And it's been cool to see the transformation. And, I would love, maybe we just start there, for the listeners. You want to talk a little bit about this journey you've been on, starting with, I imagine co-founding, Troops back in the day.
Yeah, dude, totally. So I think, high level, I was the consummate overachiever, right? And went to Princeton, captain the football team, president of my frat, Business Insider 25 under 25, Forbes 30 under 30, started a first round capital tech company at age 27, and which was Troops. And, I just was all about trying to kill it. And, and I think that strategy worked for me for a while, right? Because the outside world told me that I was doing well for myself. And probably about 4 years into Troops, well, I guess there's two little mini stories here that really kind of that I'll weave in that really that kind of introduce my mindfulness and consciousness journey, which we'll get into more. But when I was 24, I woke up with a bald spot in my beard the size of a quarter, and my cousin had alopecia, which is when you lose your hair, and he had, the dude literally has no eyebrows, no eyelashes, no hair on his body. And I had developed alopecia, the start of alopecia, because I was so stressed out about trying to be successful. And the truth is, I had no reason to be that stressed. Like, I had a good job, I had all these things, but I was, just burning it so hard. And that's what got me on my meditation. That's when I started my meditation journey. So I started with Headspace, started meditating every day. I would do it for a couple months, then I would stop. And then I would come back to the practice because I'd have some anxious relapse. And in the early days of Troops, we weren't paying ourselves for the first 6 months. And about 3 months in, my co-founder was on vacation, and I was in this office by myself every day, and just having that feeling of like, there's a zillion things to do. We don't know what we're doing. I don't know what I'm building. Like, the thoughts just, everyone's going to realize I'm a failure. Everyone's going to realize that I can't cut it as an entrepreneur. And I'm going to have to go like get a job, and getting a job is a failure, and all these stories. And I had a panic attack, and I had to basically like, I like went outside and like laid on the pavement of this like office building, like 42nd floor office building patio for like an hour, over an hour, just trying to like breathe myself back into normalcy. And so that was a big inflection point for me, because after that day, that was probably 3 or 4 years after I started meditating, I was like, I'm never going to not meditate again. Like, it's just like, this is like brushing my teeth. Like, every day I'm going to meditate, because I know that it at least helps me from spiraling into these anxious states. And so fast forward 4 years into Troops, I think we had raised our Series A at this time. For the people that aren't listening, Troops was basically an integration platform. Our bread and butter was, we were the first real company and market leader to make it really easy to use Salesforce from Slack. And ultimately had a lot of other companies we integrated with, but that's ultimately what we were known for. And so 4 years into my company, my life looks pretty good, right? I'm raised a Series A, I think, at that point. I had a girlfriend. I'm living in New York City. I was in great shape. I have friends, like all of the stuff. And I just kind of realized that I actually was pretty miserable, you know? And like it was very confusing because um, my life looked like very like a great picture. You know, it was like I did all the right things, like went to the right school, I like good at sports, like good in a career, like getting awards, you know, like all of the things. And yet here I was uh, feeling like shit. And you know, it basically I had tried therapy, that didn't really do a whole lot for me. And a friend of mine invited me to an ayahuasca ceremony, and I had never done any. I was like not a drugs guy. Like I just drank, like, you know, smoked pot a handful of times in my life, never did anything else. And, but like I was just desperate for something to pull me out of this hole. And I had met a lot of entrepreneurs who had said it was like a really impactful experience for them. So I was kind of like, all right, like F it, like why not? I'll try this. And that was my first real big pivotal experience that I really started to reevaluate my life and turn into a new direction. So that was a lot of information. I'll pause there, but hopefully that at least sets the stage for, um, you know, just kind of my wake up call and burnout and, you know, where following the default script led me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I mean, I can resonate deeply with that feeling of confusion when, you know, I've been thinking about it as like almost like rock bottom on top of the mountaintop is like how I've been like visualizing it, where it's like you climb this
Mm.
mountain and it's everything that you hoped for. Like if I imagine 12-year-old Scott sees your life in New York with, you know, your girlfriend and this company, a kid is probably like, oh my God, we made it. And then you, as, you know, the adult version of yourself, you know, you just all the hope that you had of climbing that initial mountain kind of just like, is this it? And that feeling of confusion is bizarre. And you feel like something's deeply, deeply wrong with you. Because you're
Mm.
at the same time wanting to feel gratitude, and a lot of people don't get the opportunities and things. Um, how did you manage that initial confusion?
Yeah. Well, I think for a while it was, you know, there was an illusion that I was just one achievement away, or one whatever. You know, I
Hmm.
used to, like so many people, I was very into personal development. I used to do these exercises where you like rate the quadrants of your life, right? It's like, all right, health, business, money, like put a score 1 out of 10. Like, what would make it a 10? Like I did all those things, right? And then you go and you just try to start keep knocking those things off. And that was my original strategy. And then yeah, basically, you know, that didn't work, which
Hmm.
led me to dire straits, and things that were outside of my comfort zone, like psychedelics. And
Hmm.
basically, what happened is during that initial psychedelic experience, I felt like I was able to make contact with my divine nature, my true self, I call it. And this is that inner voice deep in the stillness that represents the eternal part of your being. And we basically had a multi-hour conversation about what the hell this is, you know, what my life is about, why I'm here. And one of the most impactful things that came out of that discussion was this phrase of like, you've been here many times, you'll be here many more. And it got me out of this conceptual idea that this was my one life and this was my one shot to make the most of it,
Yeah.
which was like this undercurrent of stress and optimization and all of these things, was ultimately being afraid of dying. And so once that once I had this experience, which was really my first altered state of consciousness, where I was not really, there was, the veil was lifted about like reality in some ways. I, it was just like this fire was lit inside of me to go and discover truth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, I had this whole mental model of like what life was all about and what success was all about and who I was and all these things. And then I had this, massive blow up of that idea in this experience. And my reaction to that was, I've been playing the wrong game. I've been kind of like trying to work at my life from the outside in instead of the inside out, and really getting to the bottom of who I am and what this experience is. And so after that, I would say, I became very interested in exploring why I was the way that I was, what is reality, and discovering truth.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's really when my consciousness journey began. And for me, the way that I think about consciousness is ultimately it's what is creating our experience, and what is this experience that we're in,
Mm-hmm.
and seeking to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And, for me, I tried many different, I basically applied the same level of ambition and intensity to that inner journey that I did at the outer journey. And as I did that, there was lots of insights about like why my life was to come back to the confusion. I started to really understand what awareness meant. And I started to really see the deeper layers of why I was the way that I was. And how I think about awareness is there's ultimately a true reality, like a undeniable truth about this experiences, and we can only always see a portion of it. But as we work on our awareness, we get to see a greater portion of truth. And the early manifestation of that for me was just basically recognizing my programming, around things like, oh, psychedelics are bad. They're drugs. Well, where did I get that idea?
Yeah.
Is that true? Oh, you'll be happy if you have X amount of success. Well, where did I get that idea? Oh, like girls will like you if you have X pack abs. Well, where did I get that idea? And it was just starting to a recognition that my consciousness, my sense of self was a inherited sense of self created by everything I had been exposed to. And that beyond that, there was actually something much deeper, much more true, and frankly, much more content and happy and joyful. And so, for me, the confusion was really a journey of, it catalyzed me into this journey of seeking truth and understanding about myself and the world. And, that's the journey I've been on ever since, man.
It's the only journey, the only game worth playing, I think.
Ram Dass has a great book called "The Only Dance There Is."
Yes.
And it's just so aptly titled, because once you get on that journey, I mean, there's just nothing more rewarding, interesting, challenging, but it's so enriching that it just motivates you to keep going.
Yeah, yeah. There's another Ram Dass quote I love that kind of is going to tee up my next question, and it's I'm paraphrasing, but it basically says you have to remember that you're a divine being full of light and love, and you also have to remember your social security number. So it's this funny duality of like you have to hold two things to be true. And so, as you were saying that, and I've had some profound experiences myself with psychedelics. I went down to the Amazon about 6 years ago, sat with Aya a few times as well. And I had a lot of these similar realizations that you had. It I sort of maybe ignored them to my own peril a little bit because I got thrust back into, quote unquote, the real world where I have to remember my social security number.
Right.
And I would say it initially caused almost like more friction or more confusion in my life. And I guess that questioning everything was really confusing for me, because I was like dipping my toes in the work, which I think is almost like a dangerous place to be because you're starting to have all these profound realizations, but you're not really acting on them in your um, in your life. And I felt like, I found meditation, I found yoga, but if I'm honest with myself, I was almost like weaponizing or the work, if that makes sense. Like I would use these things and use these understandings to continue to keep myself optimized at the highest level. Cause I knew, if I meditate today, I'm not going to have a panic attack, like you said, and it's going to be able to allow me to go and achieve more and achieve more. And it was still
Right.
super achievement based. What was sort of that timeline for you did it feel immediate where you went and made some pretty profound changes in your life right away, or was it more of a sloper?
No, it's definitely more of a slope. And I would say that what you described, I would just share with everybody is just a normal continuum. It's just so normal where we have these things that we see are enhanced, quote unquote, enhancements, and then we try to use them to the existing mental model or game that we're playing. And so, and I did that with meditation for 6 years. I had a very performance oriented relationship with meditation. And it wasn't until I kind of had my mind blown that I was like, well, wait a second, maybe there's actually something deeper here. And so there was a curiosity, but I was still applying the same way of like, I'm going to use this stuff to improve my external reality. And that's the key source of all my problems. And what happened with me is after that first Aya experience, I was like, oh, this was dope. I'm going to do this every quarter. This is going to be like my tune up. I'm going to go and I'm going to get all these magical insights and I'm going to use them. And so 3 months later, I got a couple, someone invited me to an Aya experience. That was an entrepreneur. I went 3 months later. And what happened to me is I had this thing called a Kundalini awakening process initiate. And essentially, I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know what was happening to me, but I had this crazy energy shooting through my body for 6 hours straight. And everybody was like, oh, it's just like the medicine and blah, blah, blah. And that experience of these spontaneous energy movements and shaking and all this stuff that just kept happening way after the retreat. It was happening to me every day, nonstop, constantly for months on end.
Wow.
And I was pretty concerned. I was like, this doesn't seem like this is just like a residue. Like something is fundamentally up with me. And I thought I might have all these, diseases. I thought I effed myself up. And I basically, that became my number one focus. So I was like running this company, but I was having this crazy shit happen to me physically where like that was all I was concerned about, where I was just like reading and going to doctors, figuring out what's going on. That took about a year. And eventually I found a teacher that was like, oh, this is what's happening to you. It happens. It's, I wouldn't say normal, but like, this is a known thing. And this is actually like part of your path. And so I had this interesting situation where the universe essentially orchestrated my life so that this had to become number one because I was physically, I don't even know what you would want to call it, man. I just had so much weird stuff going on with me that it was like, I can't like dip the toe in. Like this is what your experience is going to be now until you to figured out. And so, yeah, I would say I had a very like 0 to 100 type experience where I didn't really have a ton of that, as much of that like earth shattering thing. And then I'm going back and I'm doing, doing the same old shit. But there's to this day still parts of me that still, are these patterns of the consciousness of ways of doing things that I have to watch and continue to work on. And it's, the journey just never stops. Like there's no destination. And I would also share that there is a real difficult duality that one faces when they have these realizations and they realize that, wait a second, maybe what I actually want is just to feel good all the time. And maybe there's actually a more fundamental way to work on that, which is oriented in terms of this consciousness stuff versus trying to perfect the outside world. And then it's like, well, what do I do? Because most of the models that we have in our culture of someone who takes their inner work or inner journey seriously are like, go to an ashram, go become a monk, like become a renunciate. Like we don't have this rich tradition of what they would call in the East of a householder, where someone is devoted to their own personal evolution, but is also, yeah, paying the bills, remembering the social security number, all the things you said.
Mhm.
So there was certainly, I would say that was part of that experience of that year of really trying to understand, okay, so if this is the number one thing and this is where life is calling me, like how do I make that work for like this life that I set up for myself,
Mm.
which is like startup founder, living in New York, I got bills, like all these things, right? And that I think that's a conundrum that a lot of people face right now as they're having their awakening.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's been an interesting realization for me too. It's like you mentioned this renunciate thing, and I've fallen prey to that a little bit, with selling everything I own and dramatically going to, travel the world. And we'll see if that's the right path. It's part of my journey, but I'm still really called to like build things. I have to actually stop myself at one of the more creative, periods of my life since leaving the fund. I'm trying to like really slow down, and it's not that you can't go and build. It just feels like when it's coming from a different place, and you're going to bring different things into the world. And even upon reflection of being in VC and backing all these founders, like I genuinely would tell the team and tell people who ask me, I looked for something called the sickness. And this is like, I would say that I look for founders that have something called the sickness, and I would loosely define it as they have an insatiable drive that will never dry up. And that only usually comes from a place of like suffering. Like they're trying to fill some like gap or hole. Um, and so, if you think like, not to get, too conspiracy-esque, but like a lot of our big companies that have a big impact on the world are built by people that are fairly sick, and I think our world would look a lot different if people built companies from a more conscious, aware place.
100%. I mean, there's actually research that shows how entrepreneurs have like a statistically significant greater number of trauma, or like they essentially have a lot more trauma than the average person. And it makes sense, right? Like ultimately I had an experience that was enlightening about where my ambition came from, where again, back to the physical body being a kind of a communication vehicle for pointing us to things. I was chronically sick, chronic fatigue. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't work. It was during the time we were trying to sell the company. All I had was enough energy to basically get on a Zoom call. And I remember sitting on my couch one day and just being like, my wife being like, "How are you doing?" And I'm just being like, oh, God, I feel so fucking worthless. Can't do anything. And it was like a light bulb hit me where I was like, wait a second. Oh my God. Because I always thought of myself as a really confident guy. Like I've always thought of myself as like, oh, I could do anything. And in that moment, the words literally came out of my mouth that I realized that if I wasn't achieving, if I wasn't productive, then what I really thought about myself was that I was worthless.
Mhm.
And so, really, all this ambition and all this drive was really just a strategy to avoid feeling worthless and to invalidate that concept in my subconscious. And I think ultimately that is, I don't want to say every entrepreneur that's has that type of sickness, as you would call it, is
Yeah.
coming from. But I certainly think there's a much greater majority of people that are driven by that unconsciously than some of these higher states of creation, which are things like love and inspiration
Mhm.
and a desire to contribute to the world that really comes from a place of wholeness.
Yeah.
And so you're on the money, dude. And you even see this. I did a podcast with Martha Beck. Martha Beck is Oprah's life coach. She's a total badass. If you I think it's been really well received, that episode. And she talks about how Jeff Bezos in his 10Ks says like he wants every Amazon employee to feel fear.
That's so
and
fucked.
and it's like we like put him on a pedestal as like some amazing dude, and it's just like the consciousness, like that is the consciousness that he is creating from, and that is also the consciousness that our society has been rewarding. And I think ultimately that's breaking down.
Yeah.
It's just, there was a period of time where people would subject themselves to those conditions when they thought the reward was worth it. And I think a lot of people are realizing that that's no longer a trade worth doing. And I think many founders even are realizing that that's just a losing game to play.
Mhm.
And, our culture still hasn't, I think it's still a minority thing. But I think there's starting to be a wave of, of people that really kind of want to do things a little bit different.
Yeah. A big wave too. Again, if you're listening to this podcast and you're struggling and you're questioning, know that most of the people you look up to are also doing the same thing. And they might just be even more lost, have an even bigger life, which maybe is scarier for them to, realign and readjust. But, it's coming, and it's sad on one end because there's a lot of people in pain right now. But ultimately, that valley that we go through is what spurs us to grow. Have you heard of this book by David Brooks called The Second Mountain?
I know it well.
It's for the listeners. So basically, it's the whole thing is a bit of like a metaphor for two phases of life. And it talks about the first mountain, which is focused on personal success, career, status games, reputation, accomplishment, ego. That's certainly the game I was playing for a long, long time. And I really thought that was the only game. I was like, oh, you climb this mountain and then fucking rock and roll. But then it goes on to describe almost if you're lucky, you experience this valley, and the valley sucks. The valley is, what Scott talked through. It can be physical. It can be burnout. It can show up in addiction. It can show up in all sorts of different ways. But you have this period of like loss, questioning, can be deep suffering. And it kind of forces you back to the bottom of a new mountain. which is, you're climbing for completely different reasons outside of self. It's like for meaning, it's in service, could be to help relationships, commitment to like a cause or something bigger than you. Um, and your journey, Scott, like looks almost to me like the perfect representation of kind of those two mountains where you go and you have this incredible success at troops. You have these awakenings in the valley, and it feels like you're now transcending onto this second mountain. And I think people like Bezos and these things, they get caught on that first mountain, and that mountain just keeps getting bigger if you let it. I don't think the first mountain will ever stop unless you either jump off the mountain to the valley or life does that for you. But I guess what advice would you have for people that might feel in that valley right now?
Yeah. Well, I have a hot take on the second mountain thing real
Okay,
quick that
let's
I
do
want to
it.
share because I actually think David Brooks's model is limited. And so and don't get me wrong, I think it's a positive development to go from first mountain to second mountain. And I think that continuum is something that is part of the path. It's a predictable part of the journey, but there's more. And the way that I think about it is, and this is actually a very big metaphor in the book that I'm about to publish called Conscious Accomplishment, which is really how to hold these two things, which is you want to achieve in the world, but you also want to, deeply commit yourself to your consciousness, is the difference between climbing a mountain and going on an upward spiral. And so the upward spiral is a symbol that has been used throughout history to basically describe personal evolution. And the way that I think about it is that the spiral widening, that circumference, is your awareness. It is your understanding of reality and yourself, of just everything. And basically, when you're climbing mountains, there's an idea of an apex. Like you get to a top, and then you're like, oh, that was cool, and then and maybe it's not what you wanted, or maybe what it is what it is, and then you go to the next mountain, and okay, all right, I achieved that thing that David is talking about is essentially moving from I to we, where it's like, okay, it was all about me, and now I'm on this we mountain where I'm like, okay, I'm going to have the biggest impact in the world, and I'm going to contribute to my community, and that's great, but again, you run into a similar phenomena where you think that reaching some summit is going to get you to something.
Right.
And granted, that's more oriented towards service. But the way the spiral works is that the destination is infinite, and the climb is about understanding. It's about awareness of everything. And so you will just continue to rotate upwards and continue to have greater awareness. And the beauty of that is that all the mountains can fit inside of the spiral. Like you can have the service and you can have the achievement, you can have all that thing, but the fundamental thing that you're moving towards is your own personal evolution of your consciousness and your own understanding of yourself and of reality, and ultimately of all of it, because it's all the same thing. And so, yeah, I like relate to like that's actually the climb that I'm on. And there might be some service mountains contained within that spiral, and that's a part of the thing. But like ultimately, like I'm here for that, and I'm here to help bring other people up that spiral. And I would argue that, like, you're right. There's a lot of people in my life who everything in their life has gone well. And you could argue that to some degree, these people that are building these megalithic companies, having a lot of success, like they've never really had anything rattle their system that basically made them stop and say, hey, your strategy isn't working. Like, and the way that I interpret that is someone's karma and where they're at on their journey of as a soul. Right. And so, there's people that they want to have the lifetime of basically crushing it, right? And all those things. And that's fine and cool. Go do that. But there's you can't do that forever, right? And so if you really believe in this idea that you're an infinite, eternal, divine being, you're going to start to have these other desires and experiences, and ultimately reality will put you on that path that you intended for this experience. And so, for me, I was dragged kicking and screaming onto this upward spiral conscious path, second mountain. I didn't want to do that, but that's where life positioned me. And I would say there's a deep rest in that understanding, because it's happening for your evolution on a timeline that's much bigger than 80, 100 years or whatever it is. And so I would say to the people that are going through that suffering, and they're looking around and they're being like, well, how come so-and-so has it really easy? And how come so-and-so everything's working out and blah, this sucks. And you're being positioned for your evolution. And when you leave this experience, you're not going to be able to take the number of LinkedIn followers, the companies that you did, the promotions, you're not going to be able to take that with you. But what you will be able to take with you is your consciousness, which persists beyond this experience. And so you're actually, by falling into the valley, you're actually moving up the spiral, because now you're being forced to face these things that are essentially holding back your potential as a human being and your understanding of yourself and reality. And so it sucks, but that's just kind of how it works. Because without that type of friction and confrontation, there'd simply be no impetus to start to become aware of these things and to evolve. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of nuanced advice I could have for someone in a valley. Dude, I'm in a valley right now, because it's not like a valley is a one-time thing, right? It's like you're just continuing these cycles of growth and understanding, which require friction. And you become more equipped to navigate those, and you become more resourced, but like, it's still hard. It's fucking hard, man. But that's kind of what we signed up for, to come here and have this experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And know that, yeah, you can reframe the hard things as, okay, this is just like another valley, and I know what comes on the side of a valley. I used to actually think, I would have this thought sometimes on psychedelics about, I would like have these visions of me being like old and like just about to die. And the things that would come to me that I would miss, like obviously all the things you think, love and loved ones and everything, but there's also the really hard moments, because in those moments you feel exceptionally human and you feel exceptionally aware. And I think, I imagine when you're going to leave this kind of plane, you don't just miss like the good times, the top of the mountain. You're going to miss those things that make you feel really, really human and alive.
Yeah, definitely. And those things are required. Like, the thing that I'm experiencing right now is I got some chronic pain going on. It's been really elusive. And, these experiences, what they all kind of point us back to is expanding our love and compassion for ourselves and everyone around us. And so it's like, that's just the underlying gift is like, can you love yourself when you're in such a valley that you can't do anything? Can you do that? Like, and life will just continue to deliver you circumstances to expand that capacity. And it's kind of like, people like to think of like, oh, life conspires in your favor. Like, life conspires for the evolution of your consciousness. It's that simple. And there's benevolence in that in your favor, but it's when you start to relate to reality unfolding for that purpose, it just changes everything because you start to realize that there's gifts in all these experiences and that you're essentially getting information on your next rung on that growth journey of understanding and expanding as your potential as a human.
Mhm. I really like this idea of the, you know, expanding spiral. It does feel like it's a stronger metaphor than the mountains. I feel like the mountain is kind of telling you that the mountain metaphor is telling you that, the greatest thing you can do is kind of be of service of others. And I think the upward spiral is putting the idea of expanding awareness and seeking truth as the highest calling. And through that, you're going to be able to, help and serve others in a deeper, more impactful way. And that's a
Well,
good, yeah. Go
I
ahead.
was going to say the desire to contribute is automatic.
Mm.
And so like, this is why I'm obsessed with consciousness and spirituality and is like, you go down the mountain, you go up the mountain, the one mountain doesn't work, and then you go up the next mountain, and it's like, trying to will yourself to be in service of others and to love others is only going to get you so far. But what happens when you go on a consciousness journey and you start to become aware of more things, and you start to see the interconnectedness, and you start to have your heart open, you just automatically want to support other people. There is no trying, right? It's just like it's a phase shift of who you are. And so again, I think there's the second mountain is like kind of often I see people redirecting their ambition to want to, okay, well, I tried to serve myself. That didn't work. So now I'm going to try to serve others, and that's going to make me feel really good. And
Huh.
everybody's going to tell me how great I am because I served 1 million meals and I have this big nonprofit, and that's a positive development. But when contribution and service really works and also has the biggest impact, when it is actually just an expression of who you've become.
Hmm.
And to me, that is a natural byproduct of the consciousness journey. When you learn to love yourself more, you learn to love others. You love others. You just love them. You just love people.
Yeah.
And it's just like, dude, of course I want to help you. Of course I want to give you a big ass bonus and a big tip. Of course I want to give and all these things. And that was a big understanding for me, is like to focus on the input, and the expression evolves with that inner shift.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like when you get there and you're in those moments of, pure love, you can really see people. You don't even really have to, you're helping by just being. Just what you're radiating is helpful and healing for people. I have a good friend who's just this angel ball of light. She's incredible. And she says the greatest gift you can give someone is your nervous system. And I love that because it just makes it really real. I feel like vibes and I just have good vibes, feels hard to control, but a nervous system feels like, oh, that's something I can control and sort of give others, which I think is cool. The other thing I wanted to kind of segue to is, we talk about this upward spiral. I know you recently incorporated that into your logo of this new company that you're working on, and congratulations for launching Conscious Talent. Many listeners listening to this are high performers who are interested in expanding consciousness, but the high performer part is not going to go away. The ambition is often not going to go away. What have you sort of done differently, and how do you even feel about ambition now as you go on this next journey where you're in service, but you still want to build a great enduring company?
Yeah. So I think a big idea for me that was pivotal in my journey is to understand the difference between content and context. I first encountered this distinguishment through the work of David Hawkins. He's written a bunch of good books, Power versus Force, The Maps of Consciousness. And basically, content is the underlying, is like just like what something is, right? It's like I'm drinking coffee, that's content. I'm building a company, that's content. Context is like the underlying drivers of that activity. And you can build a company, like you can give somebody a big tip, as I love this example. It's like you can give somebody a fat tip because you want to feel like you're a baller, or you want to feel like you're impressing people, or you want that person to see you're a good person. Or you can do it because you genuinely want to give to someone else. And so when you understand this whole content versus context thing, you realize that there's no fundamental, like the context is ultimately what matters more so than the actual activity itself. So if we just take ambition. Ultimately, there's nothing about ambition that undermines your consciousness journey. There's nothing about ambition that undermines your growth, your virtue, any of that kind of stuff. But what matters is, where does it come from? And does it come from because you don't feel enough? So you want to do all these things to feel good about yourself? You need to prove yourself, like all this, essentially a lack of wholeness? Or does it come from these other sources of action, such as inspiration, love, just because you love doing it? Like, you know what I mean? You can't not do it because you love it, so doing it so much. And that's where the focus needs to be if you're trying to kind of walk this dual path. And for me, the way that I've done that is 6 years ago, I met my spiritual teacher, and she told me that my problems weren't my problems. My problems were my reactions to things, because my reactions were indicative of my of the, essentially the patterns of my consciousness. And, two people could see a big ass wave. One person could be like, I can't wait to surf that. Another person could be like, that's scary as shit, right? They have a different consciousness. They have a different reference system in their consciousness. And so I developed a habit of just monitoring my reactions to everything, and started to write down, like, every time I was triggered, every time I was like, and that practice just continues to expand and expand and expand in subtlety. And so when you start to just develop this inbuilt habit of observing your reactions, as you start to approach things like building a company, launching a product, whatever, you're doing the activity, but you're watching your reaction at the same time.
Yes.
And in those reactions, you're essentially seeing where the context is, and you're seeing these layers of your consciousness in how you're responding to something. And so for me, that has been two things. One, it's been the biggest unlock to live an integrated path of putting consciousness at the center of my life, but also doing all these other things, because those other things are actually my path of seeing myself more clearly. But it's also helped me kind of understand, as I take these actions, where they're coming from. Right. And if it's like, I realize is like, oh, I'm doing this thing because I want to feel important and blah, blah, blah. It's like, cool. Next opportunity. Thank you, social media or whatever. If it's coming from a place of purity, I'm like, oh, dude, yeah, like, I'm just going to keep doing this. I love this. Like, and as you start to practice that, you really just start to become very, very attuned to where things are coming from. And so I remember I had a lot of hangups and questions around, was ambition compatible with this journey that I'm on? And now I think the answer is absolutely yes. And what really matters is where it comes from. And you can increase your skill at how you understand that as you continue to work on this stuff.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love that teaching from your teacher. It reminds me of, I wrote recently about, someone just introduced me to it's like Buddhist parable called the Tale of Two Arrows, which is very much in line with that, where there's a first arrow, which is unavoidable. That's just the things that happen to you. You know, bad things are going to happen. But where most pain and suffering comes from is the second arrow, which is avoidable. That's what we shoot, at ourselves by creating a new story, a new reaction around the thing. And that was a powerful story where, like you, I started noticing, oh my God, it's all second arrows. My arrows had arrows. Like the stories I would build about the stories, I think mine would be closer like 10,000 arrows because my stories would take on stories of their own. But yeah, that's super cool, man. And honestly, just hearing, I think I'm at very early stages of picking apart ambition and what it means to me again. And so I like that you've come to the realization that it's a net good and it is incompatible. It's compatible. Sorry. That was one of the big questions that I wanted to answer with this podcast. And it's helpful that it's coming up positive so far. And the second question about this podcast, which I would love your take, this is called Wake Up Call. And my goal is to not take away the valley because you can't, but maybe help people wake up before a really big wake up call, before it gets bad. Do you think that's possible? Or is that kind of a fool's errand and people need to go through it?
Well, I mean, here's how I think about it. Like, there's this concept in my book called the responsive reality. And basically, the idea is that there's like this linear view of reality, which is like, if I do X, Y will happen. Right. And then there's a kind of a deeper, a layer behind that. That's like, there's like a master architect that's actually life is unfolding for your evolution. And that is the purpose of the universe, and purpose of my belief is that, we are a divine being, actually all one divine being here in different fractals, experiencing ourselves and evolving. So all of us are on this evolutionary continuum. That is the prerogative of kind of the one divinity. And if you don't adhere to like the call for evolution, the call for awareness, the call for the evolution of your consciousness, and you just happen to be in an experience where that's clearly part of the gig, like life's just going to continue to hit you over the head, and it's going to do it again and again until it like whacks you. And so what can you do with that? I think it really is useful for people to start to relate to reality as more than just the surface level manifestations of everyday life. Start to ask about, well, what is there a pattern here? Is there meaning here? Okay, I got fired. Like, what can I learn from this? Like, what is life itself trying to communicate to me? And I think the sooner that you start to like move beyond just this like linear view of reality where you think things are just happening and X equals Y, like, and you're like, actually, what if life had an intelligence to it and it was actually intentionally orchestrating the perfect experiences for me to better understand myself. When you really embrace that idea, the entirety of life becomes a big mirror. And what happens is you start to be able to make adjustments before you get whacked over the head. And so, that's been the big thing for me, is like shifting that orientation of like, what do I view life as? And just constantly asking the question of like, what is this showing me? Right. And if you embrace that practice of working with your reactions as a primary way of developing awareness, then it will just be automatic for you. Eventually your view of life will just be automatically switched on to interpreting everything as a reflection of yourself. And so yeah, it's not an overnight thing, but just start to ask those questions. I always like to tell people, treat things like an experiment. Like, what would it be like if you treated life for like 30 days or a week, like that it was a video game that was perfectly designed to help you become aware of things. And then everything was just, I was like, there's a master game designer and they just want you to become aware of things. How would that change how you related to everything? Probably pretty much. So yeah, I think that's a big one. And I would also say, as people have these kind of like little mini whacks on the head, the impetus for the overachiever is to fight back harder, to push more, right? To like kind of have that reflex. And I would just encourage you to just try a new strategy, and to just be like, to take a pause, pause in those things and just start to build that muscle a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe that'll be the new slogan for the podcast, helping get whacked on the head a little bit less, not fully, but just a couple times less, or more gentle.
I would listen to that podcast. I'm still getting whacked.
Yeah, for sure. And I resonate too with this. I think competitive type A people is, when life gives you a whack, my first response was always like, okay, go harder. And it would almost like give me more drive to push it. And, you also have to like make sure, whatever you're pushing at so hard, if you're going to push that hard in whatever direction, like make sure that's the life you want. Cause it's very interesting if you happen to get that life and it's not what you want and you push so hard. I'd
love to ask you, like, what was your breaking point when, like, maybe you've already talked about this on an episode, but if you haven't, let's hear it.
Yeah, I haven't. There was quite a few, it was, I would say things were sort of unraveling, a little bit. And that was, I was not sleeping for like, honestly, like weeks at a time.
Wow.
So when we went out to raise the second fund, I put up my hand and was like, I'll lead the fundraise. And, we were doubling the amount we wanted to raise. And it was also like the worst time to fundraise in the world. There was no money anywhere. But I was like, never missed a number in my life. My background sales, like I literally like, you give me a number, I'm going to, for better or worse, try and hit it. And I would literally, it's how like sick I was. Every internal email that I sent, at the bottom, it would say 50 million or fucking die. It was like a little hashtag I created. That's how deep I was it. And the not so funny part is like, I almost, genuinely like died doing it. And not sleeping, working too much, working on the wrong things. And I think that the point also, drinking too much to try and sleep, overcompensating in all sorts of ways to try and escape. But I think it was when we did it. It was actually like we accomplished the thing and I didn't really feel anything at all. And about a week and a half later, we started talking about, okay, it's time to go raise, fund 3. And I was just like, no way. Like I hadn't even processed anything. And so I think it was just a feeling of like being numb, just feeling completely numb. And, there's more layers to it, but that was kind of the big one, was actually achieving the thing that I thought was impossible and feeling very little happiness or relief, I guess is the word. No relief. It was still, now I'm just the guy who's overworked, out of shape, and not sleeping. Sure, I've done this thing, but I'm still just that guy, and it felt no different.
Yeah, that's a powerful, thanks for sharing that, dude. I appreciate the vulnerability. And, that's ultimately it right there, where it's like, until you do the inner work, you're always going to feel like being you is going to feel like being you. Like that's it right there. It's like, the difference is if solely focusing on the external is like putting your eggs in this basket of like these temporary blips of joy that are very fleeting, right? Like, you raise $50 million, you guys have a big champagne party, everybody's fired up. And then like 2 days later, you're like, it still feels like me inside. And so even if you're just like as like a logical person, like working on the inside as primary activity is just the more intelligent thing to do. And it often takes us recognizing that, like, ultimately, like, it's like, it is what it is to be us inside. We have to kind of have that experience and recognition to shift gears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the thing is too, is like when you're on that path of, like, call it obsession with a goal, you're also like, along that way, you're giving away parts of you. So you was actually getting worse, the parts of me that I do have love for and things I was sacrificing. So it got to a point where, like, the me wasn't even someone I really recognized. But I have one more question for you. I'm just curious about your kind of non-negotiable practices nowadays that keep you thinking this way. Like, they call it the inner work because it is work. It's not easy to just walk around and be ball of light and love all day. What are some of the practices that are just have become ingrained into your identity?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'll share is that, like, they're constantly evolving. Things, what once served you eventually becomes less relevant, and that's just like a pattern that is just going to continue to happen in your experience. And but I think the big one is really using my reactions as a way to basically understand my subconscious and the totality of my consciousness. And so I have a note on my phone called my freedom log. And yeah, I mean, every single time I'm taken out of peace, I'm disturbed, I'm triggered, I'm ruminating. I'm like, it isn't just like external things. It's like, I notice the internal turmoil. I write that situation down, and I make time to go into it and examine, like, what is the pattern of the consciousness that's creating that reaction. And so that's been huge. And it's like the ultimate practice for anybody that wants to go on this journey and have it integrated directly into their life, because life just becomes this giant feedback fest for your consciousness. And so that's been the big one. Other things I would say is like prioritizing self-care. And so, learning, like, it is building a muscle to stop doing things and just allow yourself to rest. And you need to have like enough reps of that to realize that it's okay and that it's safe to do that. Nothing bad will happen. And so, dude, like 2 weeks ago, we were going to launch Conscious Talent, like basically like a week before we were actually going to, before we actually did. And we didn't, because I felt like shit.
Mm.
And I basically didn't do anything all week. And I understand that's a very luxurious thing to say, that a lot of people don't have that ability. But, that type of like prioritizing how I'm feeling is so fundamental to me at this point. And it's taken me a long time to be able to get to the comfortable doing that.
Mhm.
So that's a big one. That's a non-negotiable practice. I still meet with my teacher every other week on Zoom. That keeps me grounded, and I think there's definitely no shame in enlisting support and guides, and they will come to you as needed. And I'm trying to think what else is consistent. Just really realizing that like there's these qualities in the wisdom lineage that I've been mostly focused on called Ren Shui of an open heart, which are not the idea is that our natural heart is open, and we kind of get conditioned out of it as children, and we have all these patterns that close it down, but our natural state is trusting, openness, love, gratitude, reverence. And we can treat these qualities the way the heart works. It is like a muscle where it's like, as you feel these qualities, they become more accessible because your heart learns that it's safe to feel them, and it strengthens. And so I'm quite often coming back to those qualities and trying to internally generate those feelings, so that my heart can be more unconditional.
Mhm.
And those qualities can be more persistent and unconditional in my life. And there's different meditations that you can do that. But I just think it's an important idea for people to realize that like the heart can be trained, and
Mhm.
it can be treated like anything else. Where when you put repetitions into it, it will change your experience. And yeah, I think that's been pretty big for me.
I love that, man. I love that. I actually have a tattoo on my knee that says just a series of remembering. And to me, what that means is remembering exactly what you outlined there, is that you're born with a lot of the answers, the loving, the trusting, and a lot of the journey, at least for me, is like shedding that and getting back to that energy that we were born with. Well, Scott, thank you, man. Truly. This has been a really cool conversation. These are exactly the conversations I'm hoping to have on this podcast. It's a big part of my own healing and journey. And yeah, I'll be following along your journey. I hope to see more of you. And I know you're putting out incredible content. I love your newsletter, by the way. Where can people follow along your newsletter and your own podcast?
Yeah. So if you just go on Substack and search my name, Scott Britton, you'll find my publication, which is called Consciousness, the Doorway to Human Evolution. I also have a podcast myself called Evolution FM, which is on Spotify, iTunes, those places. And yeah, I would share with you, with the listeners out there, we talked about it a little bit. I just launched a new business called Conscious Talent. The idea is really simple. If you're someone that is doing the inner work and into professional excellence at the same time, and you want to work with people that in companies that also value those things, we're really trying to become the connector between companies and amazing people that are on this kind of dual path. And you can check our site out at Conscious Talent, and you can sign up to be a part of our talent network, and or find people if you're a company. And that's what we do. And we're really trying to, yes, stoke this new wave of work, man, where these things are not separate. They're not compartmentalized. There's going to be a new way. There already is a new way of building companies and doing great work on ourselves and the world. And we want to do our part to make that shift possible for many people.
I love the mission, man. I can't even imagine what it would be like to be part of like a team of 100, all focused on the same mission. Everyone's doing their own inner work. Like usually you kind of, go into companies and maybe there's like a really conscious leader, or like there's a few people that you kind of resonate with. And if everyone is on that same page, it would just be so cool and just like fun. It feels like work would become play in like a really cool way.
That's the idea, dude. So, that's what I think the future looks like. That's what I think it's going to be like. And, you know, there's going to be a lot of growing pains to get there, but I'm with you, dude. That's the setup I want.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, I think one thing we didn't talk about, but I'll just leave this here, is that like Paul Millard, he's a buddy of mine. He could be a cool podcast guest. He wrote this book, Pathless Path, and good work. And he talked about like reclaiming your inner ambition, and how ambition should really be redefined as like essentially following your authenticity. Like that's an ambitious thing to do, is to be authentic. And ultimately, I think that's pretty much what everybody wants, is just to like really be fully authentic in all settings and received for that authenticity. And I think right now, you know, that's kind of not the way, at least in the workplace. And so I think there's an opportunity to change that, where people can really just show up and be themselves and do their thing. And it's going to be really cool.
Yeah. I'll share just on that, because I agree. Like, especially now, it's interesting that kind of AI is coming at the same time as some of these like conscious trends, and this idea of authenticity. This is probably the most ambitious thing I've done in my career, even though I've done all these really hard things, because this is the most authentic version of me. These are the conversations I wanted to have for like the last decade. I just didn't think that would work or that would be successful. And even building this brand, I went through like, you know, building the logo and all this stuff. And I did the traditional of like, what do I think people want? And I used to be pretty good at that in like marketing. Like I know what a wellness media company should look like. And I was kind of just using AI to like create this thing. And then I was down at the Esalen Institute a week ago, and I was like, fuck that, man. Like I'm going to go paint for 3 hours, and like, let's hand paint a logo that like feels really authentic to me, and like something I want to express, like something I wear on a t-shirt, like something cool, you know? So even through this journey, I can find like I still have all this old programming of trying to impress rather than like express, I think is like the way I would put it.
Nice.
So trying to do that like real expression, and hopefully some people like it. We'll see.
I love that, dude. And congrats on that. I mean, I think I think you're 100% right. Like it's way harder to be authentic than it is to like do the formula, you know? And it's kind of jacked up that that's like the culture that we're in, you know, cause we didn't make up that idea. Like that was just how we were all indoctrinated. But, you know, I was talking to a buddy today who's like, this guy is a successful entrepreneur. He sold a company. He's got a consciousness company. And he was telling me that he just wrote his first Substack article, and it was like such a effing like tumultuous experience, like putting himself out there like that, because it was so vulnerable and authentic. And yeah, I think it's fascinating that like that is so difficult and so challenging. And I just think we should acknowledge that authenticity is a currency. It is a measure of value, and something that I think is worthy of pursuing.
Totally. I love that. Well, that's a great place to wrap. Authenticity is a currency. I like that. It could very well be the currency of the future, the way this is all going down.
I think so, dude.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, Scott, appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. This has been really enjoyable. And to all our listeners, thanks for hanging out with us. And we'll see you next week.
Thanks, brother. This was a pleasure.